Hello everyone, this is an example on how to write functions. In the instructions, it says identify the dependent and independent variable, write an equation in function notation. And here's the situation. A math tutor charges $35 an hour. Now I have to determine what are the variables in this statement. I know that the fee, or the amount of money that this tutor charges, is one of the variables. I can call this a fee, or the cost. And I know that the other variable is hours. Now I have to establish which of these two variables is the dependent and independent variable. And to do that, let's try and rephrase what this means. A math tutor charges $35 an hour. I can rephrase that to say that the fee that a math tutor charges will depend on the number of hours. Okay? So when I say it that way, it tells me already what the dependent variable is. Let's say that again. The fee that a math tutor charges depends on the amount of hours. Does that make sense? Yes, it makes sense. It's going to depend on how many hours he works. That's the amount of money he will receive, or she will receive. So I can say that the fee is going to be the dependent variable because it depends on the amount of time that the person works. So the dependent variable here is fee. Now, if fee is the dependent variable, then hours is the independent variable. The other one has to be the independent variable. Now, remember in class, we had said then when we work with x's and y's, we said that x was the independent variable always. The x was free. She could be any value she wanted to be. That's what we said in class. So anytime we think about independent variable, I always think about x. Okay, because that's the variable, or that's the value that goes on the x-axis. That's independent. Okay, now dependent variables, we talked about in class that y is a dependent variable, and that's clear to see because the value of y depends on what x is. Okay, so dependent, independent. Now, why do I want to name these y and x? Well, because that's going to make my life easier when I try and establish a relationship between y and x. And we'll see how in our next step. The next step is write an equation that shows how the dependent and independent variables relate. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, some students will very quickly say, okay, let's write an equation. So what is the equation for this situation? How do I write that a math tutor charges $35 an hour? Well, the fee, we said, which is y, the fee is going to equal, this is the fee, right? Y, my dependent variable, is going to equal what? Well, it's going to equal 35 an hour. So 35. And we said that x is hours, right? So 35x. 35 times every hour. If the person works 1 hour, then it's $35. If he works 2 hours, then it's $70, etc. If this is not easy for you to do, to write an equation like this directly, then you can try and do this. You can make a table. Okay, so here's my table. X, which is hours, right? X is hours, and Y is fee, the fee. I can make a table and say, well, if the person works for 1 hour, what would the fee be? Well, that would be $35, right? Because it's $35 per hour. That's what it says here. How about if the person works or tutors for 2 hours? Well, then it would be 2 times 35, which is $70. That would be the fee. How about if the math tutor tutors for 3 hours? Then how much would the fee be? Well, if it's $35 an hour, then that would be 3 times 35, which gives you $105. That would be the fee for tutoring for 3 hours. How does this help? Well, now it's easier for me to write an equation because now I can see how x and y relate. What is happening to each one of these x's? Well, this x is being multiplied by 35. How about this x value of 2? Well, it's also being multiplied by 35. How about this x value of 3? It's being multiplied by 35. So I can say that y, the phi, is equal to the x value. But what am I doing to each of these x values? We're multiplying each of them by 35. And there you can write your equation that way. Okay? You don't have to do a table in this step, but if it helps you, go ahead and do it. Okay? If you can write the equation directly from the situation, good. Okay? Now, my third step is, because the instruction says, write an equation in function notation. Remember, we had said in class that when y depends on x, that meant that y is a function of x. It's a function of x. And how do I write that in function notation? Well, this phrase that I just wrote here means that y is the equal sign, a function of x, I should say of x here, then I can write like this. That means that this equation that I wrote here, y equals 35x, I can rewrite y and show that y depends on x by writing it this way. Okay, and now I have my equation written in function notation. And f of x is just a label. It's not something you evaluate. It's not something you use to evaluate anything. It's just a label, okay? Now, suppose that I did not use x as my variable for hours. Let's say I wanted to use h instead of x. You can do that too, okay? The important thing is that you know that h is the independent variable. So let's say I did use h. My equation would have looked like this. Y is equal to 35h instead of x. Okay, that's fine. It's a variable. Now, if I want to write this in function notation, then I would write f of h is equal to 35h. The variable inside this parentheses always matches the variable in your equation. I hope this helps. If it didn't, try and go back and look at it again, okay? And do the examples in your book.